Hi Danny, Grace and Jude. This is probably the most important section of the channel. So this is teaching you about dynamic glucose management, game set match, stopping highs, staying in target and preventing lows. So I'll put this intro video together and then I'll follow it with how to do game, set and match. So let's get stuck in. So just a little recap from the foundation section. When we're looking at continuous glucose monitoring, we're measuring the glucose that is in the interstitial space, basically the glucose that's in the fat tissue. Whereas your finger pricks, we're measuring the glucose that's in the blood. The really important thing to remember about this is it takes about 5 minutes from the glucose that's in the blood to make it into the interstitial space. Therefore, there'll always be a difference between the finger prick reading and the CGM. But the CGMs now are good enough to replace finger pricks because their accuracy has improved since the days when I used to use a Medtronic soft sensor and sticking it in with what used to be like a javelin. Why it's so important with continuous glucose monitoring, it's changed the game with diabetes management is, before when you used to do finger pricks, it was about 7 decisions a day. Before breakfast, after breakfast. Before lunch, after lunch. Before tea, after tea, and that was it. Whereas now with a continuous glucose monitor, you're checking this bad boy every sort of, in my case, 15 minutes or so. Obviously not overnight. But you're also getting alerts for the highs and lows. So between that now, instead of 7 decisions to make, you've got between 15 to 30. So every time you check in this, mine's 5.8 and stable now, I know that I'm all good to just leave that for the next half an hour. If it was an arrow down, I'd be thinking about something different. So this is what this section is all about, is how do you make those new decisions? How do you make those decisions based around where the glucose is and where it's going? It's important to know what these trend arrows mean. Mine at the moment says 5.8 and across, which means it's going to be about the same in the next 10 minutes or so. However, if it was a double arrow down, it's going to be 2 lower, it would be 3.8 in the next sort of 10 minutes. So therefore I'd have a different decision to make. So depending on which system that you're on, these are what the arrows mean, and really you don't want to think any further ahead than 10 minutes, because as you will see, these trend arrows change about every 10 minutes. So you can't use a trend arrow to predict what's going to happen in 30 minutes because it will change again in 10 minutes. Really important. Also, you really need to be using an iCGM approved device, which at the moment there's only the Dexcom G6 and the Libre 2. The FDA iCGM criteria is the highest bar of standards of accuracy. You can be very confident that the reading that you see on your CGM is going to be close to what the finger prick would be, so therefore more effective to use. What are we aiming for? So the baseline sort of is really 70% timing range. 70% of the readings between 4 and 10, or 70 to 180 milligrams per deciliter if you're using that. And really, that's going to lead to good health now and good health in the future. But if you want optimal health, we really need to be pushing higher to 70, 80, 90%. I'm at the moment 99%, but then again, I've been practicing this for the last 13 years. So it's important to think about building 5% each time by implementing some of these strategies that we're going to discuss. I want to take you back to Christmas Day. This was the pivotal moment for me in 2018 where things really changed about how to manage glucose levels. So this is how the day went. Woke up, well, I didn't wake, I woke up in the middle of the night by my high alarm, which I had set at 11. And you can see I gave 2 corrections. And just notice here, corrections take a long time to bring the glucose level down. Obviously with Santa coming, I got a little bit excited. I had a bacon sandwich where the insulin dose worked well, and then I got stuck into a Christmas Day 200 gram carb, massive high fat feast. And you can see I gave my insulin here, but despite giving my insulin, the high fat, the insulin resistance caused by that, the glucose level started to skyrocket. I needed 1 correction, nothing was happening. 2 corrections, nothing was happening. 3 corrections, nothing was happening. 4 corrections, and by this time you can see all that insulin is stacking up. It all combines together and then nosedive, heading down towards a low, and that required 3 preventative hypo treatments, which I used sugar with Coca-Cola because it was knocking around, and then a fire up the other side with another couple of correction doses. I was really frustrated by the end of this day, really challenging day, and it spoilt my Christmas Day. And at this point I had 10 years worth of diabetes knowledge, working as a diabetes dietitian, and I still couldn't get on top of it. It really made me think I need to think more differently, or approach my management of in-between high glucose levels between meals. How can I manage that differently? So the questions I was asking, that you might be asking, is why are corrections take so long to work and therefore you end up doing 2 or 3? And why does sugar take so long to work in terms of preventing hypos? So let's look at a deep dive, and really this is the key bit of information to understand. What moves the glucose fast between meals and what moves the glucose slow? So when you give a correction, you can see here, you give a correction, it only starts to begin to bring the glucose, drag the glucose out of the blood, and it only really kicks in an hour and a half to 2 hours after. In the meantime, you carry on going high and then eventually come down. But like me on Christmas Day, what you end up doing is you put in more correction doses here, stacking the insulin and then coming flying down. Contrast that with exercise. When you use a short bout of 10 minutes of exercise, you can see it drags the glucose out of the blood very aggressively, but in a very short time span, in 15-20 minutes. Therefore, the glucose level immediately starts to come back into target, drops down to target and doesn't go anywhere after that. Therefore, you don't need to stack the exercise because it will work and you'll see the full effect within half an hour. So this made me really think, could I now start to think about using exercise between meals instead of correction doses? And thinking about this fast and slow concept, well, you think about how sugar works. Sugar, when you give sugar to treat a hypo or prevent a hypo, half of it is glucose, half of it is fructose. Only half of that hypo treatment from a sugar actually treats the hypo. Half goes into the bloodstream as glucose, the other half as fructose goes into the liver and doesn't treat the hypo. Therefore, it takes a lot longer to work and often you need 2 or 3 treatments. Now compare that to using pure glucose, such as glucose tablets, Lucozade. You can see all of that glucose goes into the bloodstream immediately, and within 15 to 20 minutes, you see the proper effect. Therefore, you don't need double treatments, and therefore you don't carry on going lower. So that really made me think, how about in between meals, use exercise rather than correction doses to bring the glucose down, and make sure I absolutely use glucose-only hypo treatments. So let's replay what happened in 2019, a year later, almost the exact same Christmas Day. What happened? Well, you can see that overnight my glucose level went high with the excitement from Santa again. Obviously, I wasn't going to get up and start doing fast-acting exercise at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I was going to give a correction dose, obviously. But then I had my lunch, my bacon sandwich, went a little bit high, hit the high alarm at 11. Therefore, I thought, right, here we go, 10 minutes of jogging on the spot, high knees, 2,000 of them. And you can see within 10 minutes, the exercise had brought it back down nicely. I was drifting low before I had my Christmas lunch. Just a little bit of fast-acting glucose prevented any hypo, and therefore you can see the 200 grams of Christmas Day, the almost exact same meal, was eaten. The glucose level was on its way up, and I thought, right, today is the day that I'm going to really try this out. Put 10 minutes of high knees in here, worked well. Obviously the cheese and biscuits and the lovely food and the insulin resistance from the high fat was kicking in, so it was off up again, and it required 3 lots of 10 minutes to bring it down, but you can see it never really got above 11. And then the effect of this exercise, by making the insulin work faster and opening the side doors to the cells, you can see the glucose level came down and stayed in target. This is a massively different Christmas Day to the one that I'd had before, using insulin and sugar, using short bursts of exercise and fast-acting glucose. Now, obviously, no one is going to have the willingness to do 50 minutes of high knees on a daily basis, but realistically, no one should be eating 200 grams of Christmas dinner every day. So using these strategies, you might only need to do it once a day. So this really pushed me to thinking about diabetes different and to come up with this new thing called dynamic glucose management. Stopping highs with fast-acting, quick exercise such as high knees or rowing, staying in target by thinking about insulin timings and being active after eating, and preventing lows by using glucose only based on the trend arrow and glucose values. So what does this mean for me now? You can see my timing range for the last 3 months is 99%, so between 4 and 10 and 70 to 80. That will beat any automated pancreas system hands down. And in the optimal glucose range with people without diabetes between 3.3 and 6.7 or 65 and 120, I've got 80% or almost 81% of my time in range with virtually no hypos. So that requires thinking differently about managing glucose levels in between meals, with using exercise to bring glucose levels down, using glucose only to prevent hypos, and thinking about bolus timing and activity after eating. And that's what these next videos are going to teach you. I'm going to teach you game, I'm going to teach you set, I'm going to teach you match. So keep an eye on it. Let's go.